everyone, and welcome to our 10th annual Kickoff for One Book, One Region. It's hard to imagine that we've reached that milestone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Betty Ann Reiter. I'm the director of the Groton Public Library, and I've been part of this project since its beginnings. We're all incredibly excited about this year's book, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, by Jonathan Safran Foer. It was a bestseller when it was released in 2005. It's a great story. It's very interesting graphically if you haven't looked at the book. And we think it's so timely this year when it's also the 10th anniversary of the events of 9/11. Foer's second novel introduces us to his main character, who's 9-year-old Oscar Schell, who plays the tambourine. He also makes jewelry, he collects coins, he studies French, and he writes letters to renowned scientists. And he obsessively invents things. The novel is set in post-9/11 Manhattan, which is the tragedy where Oscar lost his father. He makes an odd discovery in his father's clothes closet. There's a small key in a tiny envelope upon which is inscribed one word, or maybe it's a name. It says black. And Oscar decides to track down the lock that this key will open, and he thinks that's going to fill the void that's left by the loss of his father. We hope you enjoy the book. You can purchase your copy here this afternoon, courtesy of Bank Square Books, and they also have signed book plates today with your purchase. A program like One Book would not have survived for 10 years without our wonderful partners. The Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut has provided financial support over the years. The Mystic Arts Center has been very gracious in opening their doors to us for the last couple of years. And that makes the event so special, having it here. And this year, there's another group that has stepped up to provide support. We've received donations from the Raymond Library in Montville, from Bolton High School, from the Waterford Public Library, the Public Library of New London, Groton Public Library, and the Ledyard Public Libraries. And now I would like to invite one of our longtime partners, Annie Philbrick from Bank Square Books, to say a few words. We can't say enough about the help, support, and contacts that they have shared with us throughout our 10-year history. So, Annie.
Welcome. I don't need to introduce myself since Betty Ann just did. Patience, who's in the back, and I are the co-owners of Bank Square Books. And I just wanted to share a little bit. Jonathan Safran Foer is disappointed that he can't be here today, but he will be back on September 12th. He did nicely sign 100 book plates for us and send them back to us. So the books in the back do have the personalized book plates in them, and we have some extras for further sales. And I just wanted to share a note with the book plates. Came a note from Jonathan that said, "Enjoy and wish I could be there, all my best." He's not here because he's filming the movie of the book, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, in New York City. And usually when the authors come, we offer them some type of an honorarium, which is usually very small because the committee doesn't have a lot of funds. And I asked his publicist if Jonathan would like an honorarium, and he said no, absolutely not. He said his visits to schools and working with the kids is his raison d'etre, and he did not want any money. Bank Square Books has participated and supported the One Book, One Region program since its inception 10 years ago. When we bought the bookstore from Stuart Lamson 5 years ago, he asked us to try to carry on his generous support of local community organizations such as the Mystic Noant Library, the Groton Public Library, and the One Book, One Region Committee, just to name a few. There is no question in our mind that we would continue this participation because this community is also what supports Bank Square Books. Without the support of our local community, Mystic would not have an independent bookstore. And without your support, the One Book, One Region program would not be flourishing as it is today. On that note, thank you for coming and for your support.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who have been to our previous kickoff events, you know that this afternoon's program is different in that we don't have our author with us today. But we do have some special things planned, so I hope you'll enjoy the program. One of the things that we have planned is something that we're hoping that you will help us with today. On the table in the rear of the room, you may have noticed that there's lots of little hands. They're tiny little hands. And if you know the cover of the book, you'll understand why they are hands. We're calling this project Wishes for Our World. And what we're asking you to do is write your wishes for the world on one of the hands, and we're hoping by the end of the summer that we will have had 3,000 of them hanging in libraries and schools and Bank Square Books, and you'll be seeing them throughout the region. And each hand represents one of the 3,000 lives that were lost on 9/11. So please take a few minutes and write your wishes on one of the hands for us. I hope you'll also take a few minutes to look at the projects that are on display on this table in the front. These are from Don Motzko's senior class at Fitch High School. They read the book over spring vacation, and these creations are the result of that assignment. More of his students will be reading the book over the summer, and they'll be joining us at the library as we offer programs every Wednesday evening in July and August, so we invite you to be there as well. And now I'm pleased to introduce this afternoon's main event, a short video that looks back at the 10-year history of One Book, One Region. I hope you enjoy seeing some familiar faces as we reflect on our beginnings and visit with some of our authors.
Well, I was blissfully unaware of One Book projects which had been in existence for a few years. I just didn't know about them until one day I ran into a woman I know, Jane Johnson, who was community service manager for the Wesley Library. And she told me she was going up to Providence to help pick one book for all of Rhode Island to read. And I had never heard of such a thing. And I began learning about one book projects. Ones in Seattle and Chicago and Kentucky, and thought, well, if it works in these places, it would be a good idea to have a one-book reading project for our area. I wrote a column suggesting we start this thing and use the day's circulation area, and volunteered that the day would perhaps print up buttons or bookmarks or something to help move this along. And it went from there. Well, within a day or two after the column appeared, I heard from Betty Ann Ryder here in Groton, and also Chris Bradley, who was head of Eastern Connecticut Library, sort of the mothership for libraries in this region. She was at Eastern Connecticut State University in Willimantic. I didn't know Chris, but she and Betty had talked, and they kind of took over. This thing began steamrolling.
The first One Book, One Region organizational meeting was really a very pleasant surprise. Betty Ann and I had organized it, thought it would be great to do a one book for the region, and just didn't really know who would show up, who else would be interested. And it turned out that there were so many people in the area, other than librarians, who were very passionate about reading.
The first meeting of One Book, what became One Book, was in January of 2002. And as I recall, our big meeting room was full. Everybody was really excited about the idea. I think my memory is that we met a couple of weeks later for this book selection committee group meeting, and I think it's probably the only time in our history that somebody made a suggestion at the first meeting. I guess we went away and all read or reread the book, and by the second meeting we had chosen Snow in August.
The selection of Snow in August is a book that really would resound to that group that we were looking to try to bring in, those teenagers. And so starting with if you think 14-year-olds to 80, 85-year-olds reading the same book, we needed to make sure we had a book that would appeal to a mass audience.
I think the program's been so successful because, much to all of our amazement, the first program was so successful. And I still remember from my little office at Eastern Connecticut State University, shyly talking to Pete Hamill and asking him if he would come out to Eastern Connecticut. And he was so charming and delightful and came to kick it off, had dinner with all of us, charmed us. I remember his appearing at NFA. After the first year, we were so thrilled to have pulled it off, because these one book things, up until the time we did it, really were done by big cities, Seattle and Chicago, and big money too. And we didn't have a budget. Pete Hamill came for free. We just asked for donations all around the area, and people were very generous.
Fahrenheit 451, in terms of raising community awareness, it wasn't the book as much as some of the activities that we had as part of that. There were some great activities. There was a science film festival that people showed, and there was a production of the play Fahrenheit 451 that a number of people came and watched. So those types of things helped show that there were a lot of community events as part of just reading this book. So it worked out pretty well. The selection of The Kite Runner was probably one of the more helpful things in terms of putting one book, one region on the map. When we picked that book, it wasn't a bestseller at the time. It really was just a book that was sitting there near the bottom of the list. And very quickly, when we buy 4,000 to 5,000 copies of a book, one title, that really quickly moves it up the bestseller list, and all of a sudden there was a big buzz about The Kite Runner. Everyone was starting to read The Kite Runner.
I think participating in the One Book, One Region program had a tremendous impact on how people viewed or received my book. I think because of the themes in the book about family, about friendship, about sacrifice, forgiveness, these are very human, universally human themes. And I think when the community read the book was kind of a glue. It brought people together, gave people a common forum on which they could discuss these very universal themes, even though the story was set in Afghanistan. Choosing
a book like The Kite Runner, I think, was very important to how future years of One Book turned out. We often tell people when we're asking them to come here to participate in our One Book program that we've had well-known authors like Khaled Hosseini here, and I think that has definitely influenced people about their willingness to come.
You know, having my book selected, Mountains Beyond Mountains, for One Book, One Region, in 2005, I think whether it was 2005 or any other year would have been quite gratifying, as I expect it would be for any author. I'm very fond of these programs. They're very good for writers, but they also can connect writers in a more direct way with readers than writers usually get a chance to do.
Traveling with Farmer to Moscow and Siberia, and well, really all over the world, I was exposed to more reasons for despair than I'd ever seen before or indeed imagined. And yet it was the most exhilarating experience of my life. I remember how I used to turn away from stories about the AIDS pandemic when I was reading the newspaper, just flipping past the stories because the problem seemed too big, too complicated, too expensive ever to be solved. But here were Farmer and his colleagues saying, no, it's not too big, it's not too complicated, it's not too expensive, and here's the proof.
In 2006, it was our 5th anniversary, and we were looking to try to do something a little different again, and we realized that there's a lot of an audience that we're not actually reaching. Although the book that we were choosing, The True Story of Hansel and Gretel, was a little controversial and probably a little bit on the edgy side for our high school students, 14 and 15-year-olds. So that was why we went to choose 3 books that year: a book for adults, a book for teenagers, and a book for younger children.
When I was invited to participate in the One Book program, I was honored. The true story of Hansel and Gretel makes the Holocaust personal for the reader. It isn't set in the camps, it is set in an ordinary village with ordinary people like all of us. And it forces the reader to think, what would I do if this happened in my town?
This year, I have to say we got very lucky. It was one of our easiest and earliest decisions. When we read Across 100 Mountains, we knew that we had found the perfect balance of a good story and a timely topic.
Immigration is a very difficult topic to talk about, but it's so important for communities to be open to discussion. By choosing books that deal with this issue, the One Book, One Region program has been able to encourage its community to talk about such an important topic. I truly hope that by reading my novel, Across 100 Mountains, people have been able to get an insight into the human side of the immigrant experience.
When we used Richard Glaubman's book, Life is So Good, it's the story of this elderly man in his late 90s who learns to read for the first time. And he talks about his whole life and all of the experiences that he lived but hadn't been able to read. It was an important book in terms of a great historical book, in terms of how much this one man had seen over 100 years.
My first thought upon hearing that Life is So Good was selected as the title for the One Book, One Region was how proud George Dawson would have been to have heard that news. He took such great pride in, after almost a century of waiting to attend school, taking that opportunity and then learning how to read. And to share that story with so many people would have been something that would have made him so happy. The selection for Life is So Good had a great impact on the literacy movement in the One Book, One Region area. I've received many emails, and I think his story resonated with people, and his advice that he always told everyone, you're never too old, and it's never too late, was inspiring to just so many people.
When we chose City of Thieves by David Benioff in 2009, it was one of our typical years where we start reading usually in September, right after the previous year, and we go through many books. And right from the start, I think it was probably at our first meeting, Jim Landhair said, hey, I read this great book over the summer.
I feel like a program like this gets a lot of people who probably otherwise would never have heard of the book to pick it up and open it and read it, and I love it. I mean, it's you know, you work so hard on writing a novel, and before this book I had a collection of short stories, and they were, each one took me so long to write, and I loved, you know, it was great to get it out there, but probably, I don't know, my editor can tell you, probably 400 people got that book. It's nice to have a wider audience. It's really, it makes me happy, so this program it's a wonderful thing.
One of our committee members mentioned that she had just found a book that she was going to be using in the spring with her book club, and she told us a little bit about it. We all said, well, you know, why aren't we considering that one? And so we all went off and read it, and we're just sure that that was the right book for our region.
I was thrilled to be invited to Mystic because it's a very famous seafaring community, and my book is a seafaring journey. And so to be asked to go there was tremendous. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, not exactly the home of all great ocean rowers. And in Kentucky, my book is categorized in transportation because we don't have nautical sections in our bookstores. So to be invited to a nautical community to talk about a nautical book was a great privilege and thrill.
This year's book we're very excited about. We think it's a timely topic and also a great story. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. It was a well-received book several years ago, but we think this year, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, it really is the perfect book for all of us to be reading. It's a great story. I know when people get started, they're not going to want to stop until they find out what happens to 9-year-old Oscar. And I think they're also going to be fascinated by the interesting illustrations and photography and typography that's in the book. It's a very interesting book just to look at, so it's different than anything we've done before.
I can say with absolutely no doubt that participating in the One Book, One Region program really changed things for me. It was sort of the first domino in a chain of dominoes afterwards, and we had a number of other regions that selected the book as a read, and I think that really helped kind of spread the fire and spread the word about my book. So I'm tremendously grateful personally as an author, also as a person, for the warm reception I received in East Connecticut, and I just want to wish you many, many more years of success with the One Book, One Region program. Thank you so much.
One of the markers of civilization is always a civilization that allows people to come together and talk about poetry, about fiction, about morals, about politics. And this is what you're doing in your community through the One Book program. Congratulations.
This is the One Book, One Region's 10th anniversary. I hope there is a 20th. I hope there is a 30th. I think these are great programs. There are voices out there saying that we live in the twilight of the written word. I don't believe that for a moment. I still think there's something wonderful about the book itself. This is an enduring art form, and I hope that a program like One Book, One Region will endure too.
I just want to congratulate you on your 10th anniversary and hope there are many, many more anniversaries to come. All the best.
But I think the One Book, One Region event really helps promote reading on all levels, and at a time when the publishing industry is so challenged and the idea that the printed word might even someday be out of date, the discussion and the sense of community that the One Book, One Region fosters is something that is just invaluable to all of us.
I want to thank the committee of the One Book, One Region program for its commitment to promote reading, books, and to support authors in order to enrich the lives of their community. Thank you so much for letting me be part of your history, and congratulations on the 10 years of success. The One Book, One Region program is like a bridge that connects its community to the literary world, and I hope that that bridge continues to exist for many years to come.
Thank you all again for being here. Please stay and enjoy some refreshments. We have lots to eat down on the lower level. And please stay and visit with some of the other readers from our region. Books are available for purchase, I remind you. Also, if there's any libraries here, we do have some giveaways for you in the back, some book lists and book discussion questions and so on. If you were looking for posters, you will have to, we will be in touch. They're available. We didn't bring them today, so you'll have to come pick them up probably at Groton. We hope you'll all enjoy the book. We hope that you'll enjoy the library programs and book discussions that are planned for the summer. And we will see you on September 12th when Jonathan Safran IV visits our area. The location is still to be announced. Have a great summer, and we'll see you then.